All right, fellas, we're rolling. We're rolling. Field of 12 after dark, NFL draft special. Let's go now to another um, quarterback prospect. This one is the two of the five that have transferred and found life at their second school. Made an awful lot of noise on his transfer. We're talking about Will Levis. Played at Penn State, wanted to be a Nittany Lion, was a Nittany Lion, could not get past um, the number one spot there behind in front of Sean Clifford. Transfers down to Kentucky. Smart move. Going down there in Jurassic Park. You want to earn some stripes. That's the place to do it. Last year, he was better than this year, but people will tell you that the Wildcats were better last year than they were this year. But there's a lot of mixed reviews. I've seen him way up high, and you know how the NFL draft goes. Sometimes it's just a vacuum. Quarterback needy teams leave everything else. They go to the top and they pull these guys up. In any other year, would we be looking at Will Levis as a top 5, top 10 guy? Does the talent merit the conversation for where we're talking about him being picked? We'll go reverse order. Hack, how do you see it, Nittany
Yeah,
Lion to Nittany Lion? When you look at Will Levis, does the talent and production merit where he's being discussed?
I can relate a lot to Will, I think, um, in my approach to this. It's tough, and this is my conversation with like Bryce and CJ. Like they know who they are. I think Will, although he found himself had some success, it's so vitally important at our position to know who you are and be supremely confident in that every single day
Mm-hmm.
to make that jump. Right? If there's any inkling of doubt at any point in time, that little bit of doubt is going to be exposed at that level. So for Will, I think when you look at the intent, when you look at all the physical stuff, like yes, 100%. But to Clint's point early on, today's game, what they're asking them to do, how they're asking them to do it, I don't know. And that's why I think it's going to take a very good situation for Will, right? And it's almost one of those things where like, do you want to get overdrafted? Do you want to get picked in the top 15? Struggle, have to pick yourself back up and ultimately have the career that you would have had if you were a fourth round or fifth round pick anyway, right? Um, and that's a tough decision. And Will's going to be the one that's going to have to go through the ups and downs of that. But when I look at it on the surface level, to answer your question, George, yes, I think Will can make all the throws. I think he's a smart enough kid. I don't know how well he processes. I think that was part of what held him up at Penn State, battling with Cliff, who's kind of a veteran guy, and I just don't think that Will had the confidence to do things on time. He had to kind of see a clean picture. He didn't trust it as much. There was a little bit of that crept back up this year. So we'll see. But if I feel like if he gets in the right situation, kind of like you were laying out for CJ Stroud, and that's why I kind of delineated those two. I think Stroud you can plug and play and trust that he knows who he is enough. He's confident enough in himself, his skill set to be able to go ahead. I think it's a little bit more of a fragile choice with any of these other guys just because they don't have those experiences. They don't have those stripes or those notches on their belt. And ultimately, they have the talent. I mean, the guy that we're going to talk about here soon might be the most supremely talented guy we've seen in years, in Anthony Richardson.
Right.
But it just comes down to, do they know who they are, and are you willing to shove all in on that guy and put the pieces around him to develop and ultimately mentally, physically, emotionally get them in a position where they're playing at their highest level and reaching their fullest potential. And I think Will kind of falls in that category.
That's a key. That's something that's so key. That's just not spoken about that much. And yeah, we're all going to pour it on this Will Levis deal, but just real quick, Clint and TK, could you speak on that? Knowing who you are, that coming in with an identity, because you've seen not only in your own locker rooms, but when you've been around teams and when you watch ball, there's nothing stranger and more unpredictable than when you're watching a guy who is trying to fit a character, trying to be a thing. I think I'm supposed to be the rah-rah guy. I think I'm supposed to be the cool guy. You know what? Now I'm going to wear shades indoors when last week I didn't even own shades. All this stuff. And when you know who you are, you can lead, drive, and go from that perspective. Lamar knows who he is. Burrow knows who he is. Like completely different personalities. They just go and attack. You don't see wavering. TK, are you there on that with Levis? You know, obviously Hack knows him better than we all know him, which is why I wanted him to go first. But do you see a man who knows who he is as not just a player, but as a man? I guess we're getting existential, but it is important when you're drafting this position.
I understand where Hack's going.
And time, real quick. And here's the reason why. People are like, why are they going at Will Levis? Transfer down, a lot of the shirt off photos, the flexing. It's almost like, look, you saw me on the field, but let me give you some extra just in case, not to leave anything undone. Can anybody else do this? You know, massive protein thing sitting on the counter and like, what are we getting on this, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think there's merit to what Hack said, right? He's still figuring himself out, but I think the drop off seems more drastic because of how confident Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are and who they are. And so it's not quite as bad. So relate it back to former drafts, right? He reminds me a lot in pre-draft of like a Carson Wentz, a guy with a lot of talent, a guy that's rising up the draft board. You know, hey, I had to transfer. Oh, hey, I played at, you know, an FCS school. I think I fit in with all these guys, and they're telling me I do, but I've got to go prove it. I think he's got enough shit to him to go and prove it. Really. Yeah. I mean, I've had the chance to interview him on this show. The way that he conducted himself, you can tell he's confident in himself. And I know that he did himself a disservice this year because he comes in, Kentucky has a historic year, and they're supposed to build on that. But let's not forget, it's still Kentucky. And you're playing in the east side of arguably the best conference in the country, which is the side typically that's not as good. But this year, with the way Tennessee played and Georgia, I mean, that was a real deal side of the SEC. And so did he underperform at times? Did he make some bad throws? Is he as solid of a pick up there as Bryce and CJ? No, he made some of those mistakes, but I still believe he deserves to be a, you know, top 5, top 10, definite first round type of conversation, specifically given the teams that are hungry for a quarterback this year. So I'm not saying I disagree with the fact that he still needs to figure himself out, but I think he's got a little bit more to him than we're giving him credit for.
Clint, where do you stand on him, and who does he remind you of in the NFL?
George, you ain't gonna pin me in a corner. I've been biting my tongue on this one for a minute. Listen to what y'all are saying, man. We're talking about top 10 or top 15 draft picks, and we're talking about a dude who don't even know who he is. Man, a locker room, if that is the case, and we're talking about a guy that doesn't know who he is, doesn't know quite where he fits, does he, you know, what, like a locker room's going to chew him up and spit him out. Yeah. And that to me, that's one major problem with Will Levis. And you guys just confirmed exactly what's going through my head as I watch this guy. This is the one QB in this draft relative to being in this conversation, top of the first round, in the first round for that matter, I can't get down with. I don't understand it. I've tried to look at it from different perspectives. I think the arm strength, his arm strength, I think is blown completely out of proportion. We all know that when you get to the league, your arm strength better be like the elite of the elitist if you're going to do things that Josh Allen does and fit things in windows down the field. I think it's been blown completely out of proportion in terms of how it works at the NFL level. I think his athletic ability I'm not sure that it transitions to the league the way most people think that it does. I think it's been overhyped. And I think if he gets drafted top 10, I think it'll be overvalued. I look at Will Levis and I watch him throw. I think he's mechanically flawed. I think he's going to have a hard time doing anything other than throwing the fastball right down the middle of the plate at 102. When it comes to taking things off the ball, when it comes to all the intricacies of throwing into 7 and 8 man zones in the NFL, I really question whether he's going to be able to do those things and do them at an NFL level, man. So this is the one guy that I've got major questions about, whether we're talking about tangibles, intangibles. You look at his tape and it's inconsistent. I can't get down with Will Levis being in the conversation with these other guys.
So you're probably not going on air advising the Texans to go ahead and get Will Levis.
No. The most recent, one of the most recent reports of the Texans, of course, they've ran through everybody in terms of all the different talking heads and the sourced reports. But the most recent one, or one of the most, I guess today, Trey Lance came into the conversation in the trade, but Will Levis was yesterday's bait that everybody was dangling out there. And I just don't see. Now, it was the Texans trade down from 2, select Tyree Wilson, and then they used the number 12 overall pick to take Will Levis. I don't see it working out like that, man.